This is the story of the janitor returned a lost wallet. The black millionaire didn't expect what was inside as it truly unfolded. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune in the marble lobby of Meridian Financial Tower, casting harsh shadows across the polished floor that Marcus Williams had been cleaning for the past 7 years. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the building breathed with the quiet emptiness that only came after the last executive had driven away in their luxury sedan. Marcus pushed his cart methodically between the leather chairs and glass tables, his movements precise and practiced, each stroke of the mop a meditation born from years of invisible labor. The wallet lay half-hidden beneath the mahogany reception desk, its Italian leather catching the light like a small beacon in the sterile corporate landscape. Marcus almost missed it during his routine sweep, but something about the way it sat there, abandoned and vulnerable, made him pause. If you've ever found yourself drawn to stories about the unexpected connections that shape our lives, you might want to stay with us as this unfolds. He bent down, his knees protesting after hours of work, and picked up the wallet with the same careful attention he gave everything in this building that wasn't his. The leather was soft and expensive, the kind that spoke of boardrooms and first-class flights. Inside, through the clear plastic window, he could see a driver's license bearing the name Jonathan Pierce, along with what appeared to be several credit cards arranged with military precision. Marcus had returned dozens of lost items over the years. Phones left charging at desks, jewelry forgotten in bathroom sinks, briefcases abandoned in conference rooms. He'd developed a system: check for identification, secure the item in the building's lost, and found, leave a note for security. Simple, clean, no complications. But as he opened the wallet to better see the license, something made his hands freeze. The photograph staring back at him was unmistakably familiar, though the man in the picture looked younger, his dark skin smooth and his eyes bright with ambition. Jonathan Pierce. The same Jonathan Pierce whose name graced the golden plaques in the elevator, whose corner office on the 40th floor commanded a view of the entire city. The same Jonathan Pierce who had built Pierce Capital Management from nothing into one of the most successful investment firms on the East Coast. Marcus had seen him countless times over the years, always from a distance. A figure in expensive suits striding through the lobby with purpose, surrounded by assistants and advisors, never making eye contact with the cleaning staff. To Jonathan Pierce, Marcus was part of the building's infrastructure, as invisible as the ventilation system or the security cameras. But now, holding the man's wallet in his weathered hands, Marcus felt an odd intimacy with this stranger's life. Behind the license were business cards, a gym membership, what looked like a frequent flyer card for an airline Marcus had never flown. And tucked behind everything else, almost hidden, was a small photograph that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a picture of a young boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, grinning at the camera with gap-toothed joy. The child wore a Little League uniform, grass stains on the knees, a baseball cap slightly askew. Written on the back in careful handwriting were the words, "David's first home run, July 15th, 2018. The ink had faded slightly, suggesting the photo had been handled many times. Marcus studied the image, something tugging at his memory. The boy's face seemed familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. He turned the photo over again, looking more closely at the uniform, at the background of the baseball field, and then he saw it. The distinctive red brick wall that bordered Riverside Park, the same wall where his own son had played Little League 15 years ago. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He knew this boy. Not personally, but he remembered the day this photo was taken. Marcus had been working a weekend shift at his second job, cleaning the offices of a small accounting firm, when his ex-wife had called to tell him about David's game. She'd been excited, proud, wanting to share the moment even though their marriage had ended 2 years earlier in a storm of financial stress and broken promises. "You should have been there, Marcus," she'd said, her voice carrying both joy and reproach. This little boy hit his first home run, and his father was there cheering so loud the whole park could hear him. That's what David needs. That's what any child needs. Marcus remembered hanging up the phone and sitting in that empty office, surrounded by the smell of industrial cleaner and the weight of his own failures. He'd missed another moment, another milestone, because he was working 3 jobs just to keep up with child support and his own basic survival. Now, 7 years later, he was holding a photograph of someone else's son, someone else's moment of pure parental pride. The irony wasn't lost on him. Jonathan Pierce, the millionaire who could afford anything, carried this simple photo like a talisman. Marcus, who had lost his own family to poverty and exhaustion, was the one who had found it. The building's security system chimed softly, indicating another hour had passed. Marcus looked around the empty lobby, at the gleaming surfaces that reflected his own tired face back at him. He could simply leave the wallet at the security desk with a note. By morning, it would be returned to its owner, and life would continue as it always had. The invisible man would remain invisible. But something about that photograph wouldn't let him follow protocol. Maybe it was the way the father's handwriting looked so careful, so deliberate. Maybe it was the memory of his own son, now 23 and living across the country, their relationship reduced to awkward phone calls on birthdays and holidays. Or maybe it was the growing awareness that behind the expensive suits and corner offices, Jonathan Pierce was just another father trying to hold on to moments that mattered. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving the wallet with security, he would return it personally, not because he expected anything in return, but because some things were too important to trust to bureaucracy. That photograph deserved to be handled with care, to be returned by someone who understood its true value. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work an hour early. He'd spent the night thinking about what he would say, how he would approach a man who lived in a different universe. The wallet sat heavy in his jacket pocket as he rode the service elevator to the 40th floor, his heart beating faster with each ascending number. Jonathan Pierce's office was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while the walls displayed awards, photographs with politicians and celebrities, and abstract art that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The man himself sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a landing strip, speaking rapidly into a Bluetooth headset while typing on a laptop. Marcus knocked softly on the open door, his cleaning cart beside him as a prop to justify his presence. Jonathan looked up with the expression of someone accustomed to interruptions, his eyes already dismissive before they'd fully focused. Yes, the word was clipped, efficient, designed to expedite whatever minor issue required his attention. Mr. Pierce, I found something that belongs to you. Marcus reached into his pocket and withdrew the wallet, holding it out like an offering. Jonathan's expression shifted immediately. His hand went instinctively to his back pocket, confirming what he already knew. My wallet. Where did you find it? Downstairs, under the reception desk. Must have fallen out when you were leaving yesterday. Jonathan stood and walked around the desk, his movements quick and purposeful. As he took the wallet, his fingers brushed against Marcus's, and for a moment, the two men were connected by something more than a simple transaction. Thank you, Jonathan said, already opening the wallet to check its contents. I didn't even realize it was missing until this morning. I was about to cancel all my cards. Marcus watched as Jonathan's fingers moved through the familiar contents, checking for his license, his credit cards, his cash. But when he reached the small photograph tucked in the back, his entire demeanor changed. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, and for the first time since Marcus had entered the office, Jonathan Pierce looked genuinely human. Everything's here, Jonathan said, but his voice had lost its corporate edge. He was looking at the photograph now, his thumb tracing the edge with unconscious tenderness. That's a beautiful picture, Marcus said quietly. Do your son? Jonathan looked up, surprised by the personal nature of the question. For a moment he seemed to be deciding whether to respond or to dismiss the janitor and return to his important business. But something in Marcus's tone, perhaps, or the genuine interest in his eyes, made him pause. "Yes, David." This was taken at his first Little League home run. Jonathan's voice carried a pride that no amount of professional success could match. He was so excited, he ran the bases backwards and had to start over. Marcus smiled, remembering his own son's early baseball adventures. "How old is he now?" 15. He's going through a difficult time." Jonathan's expression clouded, and Marcus could see the weight of worry that success couldn't lift. "Teenage years, you know. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing him." The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Jonathan had probably intended. Marcus recognized the pain in them, the fear that every parent carries of somehow failing the people they love most. "I have a son too," Marcus said. 23 now. "I know that feeling." Something shifted in Jonathan's eyes. For the first time, he was really seeing Marcus, not as part of the building's fixtures, but as another father, another man carrying his own burdens. "And the thing is," Jonathan continued, almost as if he were talking to himself, "I work so hard to give him everything I never had, but I'm starting to wonder if what he really needs is just time, attention, the things that don't cost money." Marcus nodded, understanding more than Jonathan could know. "Sometimes the most expensive thing we can give our children is our presence." The comment seemed to hit Jonathan like a revelation. He looked down at the photograph again, then back at Marcus with new curiosity. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Williams." "Marcus, can I ask you something?" Jonathan moved to the window, gesturing for Marcus to join him. The city spread out below them like a circuit board, millions of lives intersecting in ways they'd never know. "Do you think it's possible to fix things? With your son, I mean, after you've made mistakes?" The question was so raw, so vulnerable, that Marcus felt his own defenses crumble. Here was one of the most powerful men in the city, asking him for advice about the one thing that mattered more than all the money in the world. "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that it's never too late to start over. But it takes courage to admit when we've been wrong, and even more courage to change." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, processing this wisdom from an unexpected source. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "David has a game this Saturday. I was going to send my assistant to take pictures because I have a conference call with Tokyo. But maybe—" He trailed off, the decision forming as he spoke. "Maybe the call can wait," Marcus suggested. "Maybe it can." Jonathan turned from the window to face Marcus directly. "Thank you, not just for returning the wallet, but for this conversation. I don't get many opportunities to talk about what really matters." Marcus was about to respond when Jonathan's assistant appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, ready to deliver the day's schedule of meetings and obligations. The spell was broken, and Marcus could see Jonathan's corporate armor beginning to reassemble itself. "I should let you get back to work," Marcus said, understanding that their moment was ending. "Yes, of course. But Marcus—" Jonathan reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills. "Please, take this. For your trouble." Marcus looked at the money, probably more than he made in a week, and felt something inside him recoil. Not from pride, exactly, but from the sudden return to the familiar dynamic of employer and employee, of charity and gratitude. "That's not necessary, Mr. Pierce. I was just doing what anyone would do. Please, I insist." But Marcus was already backing toward the door, his cleaning cart a reminder of the invisible boundary between their worlds. "I hope you make it to David's game," he said. And then he was gone, leaving Jonathan standing in his office with money in his hand and questions in his heart. The rest of the week passed in its usual rhythm for Marcus. He cleaned the same floors, emptied the same trash cans, and moved through the building like a ghost. But something had changed. He found himself thinking about Jonathan Pierce, wondering if the man would keep his word about the baseball game, wondering if their brief connection had meant anything at all. On Saturday morning, Marcus was at home in his small apartment, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer. "Marcus? This is Jonathan Pierce." The surprise in Marcus's voice was evident. "Mr. Pierce, how did you get my number?" "I asked HR. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to thank you again, and to tell you that I'm on my way to David's game. I cancelled the Tokyo call." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. "That's wonderful. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I was wondering, would you like to come with me? I know it's presumptuous, but I could use the company, and maybe you could help me figure out how to talk to a 15-year-old who thinks his father is a stranger." The invitation was so unexpected that Marcus was speechless for a moment. The idea of Jonathan Pierce, millionaire businessman, asking him to attend his son's baseball game seemed to belong to some alternate reality. "I don't want to intrude on family time," Marcus said finally. "You wouldn't be intruding, you'd be helping. Please, Marcus. I think I need a friend today more than I need an employee." The word friend hung in the air like a bridge between two different worlds. Marcus thought about his own Saturday stretching ahead, empty and predictable. He thought about his son, so far away, and about second chances that didn't come often. "Okay," he said, "but I'd like that." An hour later, Marcus found himself in the passenger seat of Jonathan's Mercedes, driving toward Riverside Park. The car was everything he'd expected: leather seats, climate control, technology he couldn't begin to understand. But what surprised him was how nervous Jonathan seemed, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel and asking questions about baseball that revealed how little he knew about his son's passion. "What if he doesn't want me there?" Jonathan asked as they pulled into the parking lot. "What if I've waited too long?" Marcus looked through the windshield at the baseball field, at the parents setting up lawn chairs and the kids warming up on the diamond. It was a scene he remembered from his own son's childhood, though he'd been present for far too few of them. "There's only one way to find out," he said. They walked toward the field together, an unlikely pair that drew curious glances from other parents. Marcus felt self-conscious in his casual clothes, next to Jonathan's expensive weekend wear. But Jonathan seemed oblivious to the attention, his eyes scanning the field for his son. David Pierce was easy to spot. He had his father's height and his mother's grace, and when he saw Jonathan approaching the stands, his expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "Dad!" David jogged over to the fence, his teammates watching with interest. "What are you doing here?" "I came to watch you play," Jonathan said simply. "And I should have been doing this all along." For a moment, father and son just looked at each other across the chain-link fence, years of missed opportunities hanging between them like a challenge. Then David smiled, the same gap-toothed grin from the photograph, though the gaps had long since been filled by adult teeth. "Cool. We're playing the Cardinals today. They're tough, but I think we can take them." Marcus watched this exchange with a mixture of joy and sadness, remembering his own son at that age, remembering the games he'd missed and the opportunities he'd let slip away. But he also felt something else, a sense of rightness, as if the universe had conspired to put him exactly where he needed to be. The game was everything youth baseball should be: chaotic, enthusiastic, and full of small dramas that seemed enormous to the players involved. David played shortstop with the kind of intensity that reminded Marcus why sports mattered to kids. Every play was crucial, every at-bat a chance for glory or heartbreak. Jonathan proved to be an enthusiastic if inexperienced spectator. He cheered at inappropriate times, asked Marcus to explain the infield fly rule, and jumped to his feet when David made a particularly good play. The other parents, initially curious about the overdressed stranger, gradually accepted him as just another father trying to figure out how to support his child. In the bottom of the 6th inning, with the score tied and 2 outs, David came to bat with runners on 2nd and 3rd. The pressure was visible in his stance, in the way he adjusted his helmet and took practice swings that were just a little too aggressive. "Come on, David," Jonathan shouted, his voice carrying across the field. "You've got this." Marcus watched the boy's face change as he heard his father's voice. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, and when he stepped into the batter's box, there was a confidence there that hadn't been present before. The first pitch was a strike, a fastball that caught the outside corner. David stepped out of the box, adjusted his gloves, and looked toward the stands where his father sat. Jonathan gave him a thumbs up, and Marcus could see the connection forming between them, invisible but strong. The second pitch was in the dirt, evening the count. The third was high and outside, putting David ahead in the count. The pitcher, feeling the pressure, took extra time before delivering the fourth pitch. It was a hanging curveball, the kind of mistake that good hitters dream about. David's swing was smooth and confident, connecting with the ball at the perfect moment. The crack of the bat echoed across the field as the ball sailed over the left fielder's head, bouncing off the fence for a stand-up double that drove in both runs. Jonathan was on his feet, cheering with the kind of unbridled joy that Marcus hadn't seen from him in their brief acquaintance. The businessman was gone, replaced by a father whose son had just come through in the clutch. David rounded first base with a grin that could have powered the stadium lights, and when he reached second, he looked directly at his father and tipped his cap. After the game, which David's team won 7-5, the three of them went for ice cream at a small shop near the park. David was animated, replaying every moment of his game-winning hit, while Jonathan listened with the kind of attention that suggested he was memorizing every word. "I can't believe you actually came," David said between spoonfuls of chocolate chip. "Mum said you were too busy." Jonathan's face fell slightly. "I was wrong to be too busy. This was more important than anything I had planned. Does this mean you'll come to more games? If you want me to, I'll be at every one." Marcus watched this exchange with growing emotion. He thought about his own son, about the conversations they'd never had and the games he'd missed. He thought about the wallet that had started this chain of events, about the photograph of a gap-toothed boy that had somehow led to this moment of connection. As they prepared to leave, David turned to Marcus with curiosity. "Dad, who's your friend?" Jonathan looked at Marcus, and in that moment, Marcus saw something he hadn't expected: genuine affection, respect, and gratitude. "But this is Marcus Williams," Jonathan said. "He's the man who brought us together today." David looked confused, but he shook Marcus's hand with the politeness that had been drilled into him. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Williams." "Nice to meet you too, David. You played a great game today." As they walked back to the car, Jonathan pulled Marcus aside. "I don't know how to thank you for this, not just for returning the wallet, but for everything, for reminding me what matters." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to respond. Finally, he said, "You don't need to thank me, but maybe you could do something for me. Anything. Call your son, not just when you have time, but when he needs you. Be present for the small moments, not just the big ones. And remember that being a good father isn't about providing everything. It's about being everything you can be when it matters most." Jonathan nodded, understanding the weight of what Marcus was saying. "What about you, your son? Do you talk to him?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought about his own son, about the distance between them that had grown over years of missed opportunities and failed promises. "Not as much as I should," he admitted, "but maybe it's time to change that." That night, Marcus sat in his apartment with his phone in his hand, staring at his son's number. It had been 3 months since they'd last spoken, and even then, the conversation had been stilted and brief, but something about the day, about watching Jonathan and David reconnect, gave him the courage to dial. "Dad?" His son's voice was surprised but not unwelcoming. "Hi, Michael. I know it's been a while, but I was thinking about you today and I wanted to call. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I wanted to hear your voice, to ask how you're doing, really doing, not just the quick updates we usually exchange." There was a pause, and Marcus could almost hear his son processing this unexpected turn in their relationship. "I'm good, Dad. Actually, I've been wanting to call you too. I got a promotion at work and I wanted to tell you about it. For the next hour, they talked in a way they hadn't in years. Michael told him about his job, his girlfriend, his plans for the future. Marcus shared stories from his work, carefully avoiding any mention of his encounter with Jonathan Pierce, focusing instead on the small moments that made up his days. When they finally hung up, both men had tears in their eyes. Marcus had promised to visit soon, and Michael had invited him to meet his girlfriend. It wasn't a complete healing, but it was a beginning. The following Monday, Marcus returned to work with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. He wondered if Jonathan would acknowledge their weekend together, or if the businessman would retreat back into his corporate shell now that the moment had passed. He got his answer when he arrived at the 40th floor to empty the trash cans. On Jonathan's desk was a small frame photograph, David at second base, arms raised in triumph after his game-winning hit. Next to it was a note with Marcus's name on it. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. "Marcus, thank you for giving me back my son. The photograph you returned was precious to me, but the memories we made on Saturday are priceless. I've arranged for a small scholarship fund to be established in your name for underprivileged children who want to play Little League but can't afford the equipment. It seems like the kind of thing you would appreciate. More importantly, I want you to know that you have a friend in this building now, not just an employer. Jonathan." Attached to the letter was a check for an amount that made Marcus's knees weak. Not as payment for services rendered, but as seed money for the scholarship fund, with Marcus listed as the administrator. Marcus sat down heavily in Jonathan's chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. A simple act of honesty, returning a lost wallet, had somehow transformed into something much larger. Two fathers had found their way back to their sons. A friendship had been born across class lines, and now children he'd never met would have opportunities they might not have had otherwise. But the real miracle wasn't the money or the scholarship fund. It was the reminder that human connection could happen anywhere, between anyone, if people were willing to see past the surface differences that usually kept them apart. Over the following months, Marcus and Jonathan's friendship deepened in ways that surprised them both. They met for coffee before work sometimes, talking about their sons, their fears, their dreams. Jonathan attended more of David's games, and Marcus was often there too, cheering from the stands like the honorary uncle he'd become. The scholarship fund grew beyond their initial expectations, helping dozens of children experience the joy of youth sports. Marcus found himself coordinating with coaches, visiting families, and discovering a passion for community service he'd never known he possessed. His relationship with his own son continued to heal as well. Michael visited for Christmas, bringing his girlfriend to meet the father he was finally getting to know as a person rather than just a provider who'd fallen short. They went to a baseball game together, and Marcus told him the story of the lost wallet and the friendship it had created. "You know what the best part is," Michael said as they watched the game. "You didn't return that wallet because you expected anything in return. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's the father I remember from when I was little, before everything got so complicated." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he realized that his son had been watching all along, even during the years when Marcus thought he'd failed completely as a father. On the anniversary of finding the wallet, Jonathan invited Marcus to dinner at his home. It was the first time Marcus had seen where the Pierce family lived, and he was struck not by the obvious wealth, but by the warmth of the house. Family photographs covered the walls, and David's baseball trophies shared space with Jonathan's business awards. During dinner, David announced that he'd been accepted to several colleges, all of which had shown interest in his baseball abilities. But more importantly, he'd chosen the one closest to home because he wanted to stay near his family. "I used to think Dad didn't care about my game," David said, looking at his father with obvious affection. "But now I know he was just lost for a while. We all get lost sometimes." After dinner, Jonathan and Marcus sat on the back porch, watching David practice his swing in the backyard. The evening air was warm, filled with the sounds of suburban life, lawn mowers, children playing, dogs barking in the distance. "Do you ever think about that night?" Jonathan asked. What would have happened if you just left the wallet with security?" Marcus considered the question. "I think about it sometimes, but I've learned that life isn't really about the big moments we plan for. It's about the small choices we make when nobody's watching. The choice to be kind instead of efficient. The choice to see people instead of just their roles." "I've been thinking about expanding the scholarship program," Jonathan said. "Not just for sports, but for education, arts, whatever kids need to reach their potential. Would you be interested in running it full-time?" The offer was generous beyond Marcus's wildest dreams, but he took time to consider it carefully. "What about my job here, the cleaning? The building will survive without one janitor. But those kids won't get the same opportunities without someone who understands what it means to struggle, someone who sees potential where others see problems." Marcus looked out at David, still practicing his swing as the sun set behind him, and thought about all the children who might benefit from having someone believe in them. "Yes," he said finally, "I'd like that very much." As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. A lost wallet had become a found friendship. A simple act of honesty had created opportunities for hundreds of children. Two fathers had rediscovered what mattered most in their lives. The photograph that had started it all still sat on Jonathan's desk, but now it was joined by dozens of others. David at graduation, Marcus and his son at Christmas dinner, children from the scholarship program at their first games, their first recitals, their first days of college. Each image told a story of connection, of second chances, of the miraculous things that could happen when people chose to see each other as human beings rather than strangers. And at the center of it all was the simple truth that had brought them together. Sometimes the most valuable things we can give each other cost nothing at all. If this story of unexpected friendship and second chances brought you hope, consider sharing it with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to change course, to reach out, to choose connection over isolation. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for their own lost wallet moment, their own chance to discover that the most important treasures in life are the ones we create together.